So in this video, I speak to my colleague and friend Matt. Matt and I used to work together in comprehensive adversary simulation. Now what that means is that a client would come to us and ask us to plan a crime against them in exactly the same way as an organised criminal gang would. And that could be anything from bank robberies to data theft to stopping a manufacturing process. The only difference between us and a criminal group is that at the end of that engagement, we would give everything back and submit a full report, rather than running off to a desert island somewhere. If you don't want to watch it all, there's timestamps in the description which will take you to each specific area. There's also links to everything that we discuss in the description too. So if you like this video, please subscribe, and any questions or feedback, we're always happy to hear from you. Enjoy. And we're live.
We're live. We're here.
Here we are.
This is the reuniting of the band, as they say. It's like Queen when they came together for Live Aid, but more epic than that.
Way more epic.
It's one for the history books.
Reunited after the COVID-19.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to be here.
Crazy times. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So obviously a lot of people are going to be watching this. They're not going to know who either of us are. So to give people a bit of background, Em and I used to work together. So we met when, I think you were working at the time for SecureLink, doing a lot of stuff. I'll about that in a minute. But so when we first met, some of you will know that I run a company, INSINIA, an INSINIA security group as it became. And basically Matt and I used to run that company. So when I first met Matt, we, you were working as a pen tester. I'd kind of come off the back of pen testing and had a fair bit going on. And really, Matt and I built our business together. So why don't we start with a bit of background on that, and just about you, how do you get into hacking, whatever, and then I'll do the same, just to kind of introduce it, and then we can talk about some of our epic times together.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Mike. Happy to. I mean, personally myself, I would say that fundamentally I come from a development background, right? Because I started off writing code. I've written code. I was lucky enough to actually go to a school, middle school, where we were actually doing, I think it's COBOL or something like that. It was like sort of procedural step programming. And I guess, and that was, that was in the 90s, early 90s. And sort of looking back, I realized how lucky I was to have that opportunity, but sort of took that for granted. So it meant that growing up, I was always experimenting with code. Like the thing I could always get the A+ in was IT, like, because it sort of came naturally, like not sort of hacking away in that sense, but, modify HTML stuff. And, when everyone had sort of vanilla MySpace pages, you were always having these cool sort of JavaScript mods. But I've also worked in that domain professionally as a software engineer. But I say fundamentally a developer because even in security, right, like you're going to get further in pen tests when you're writing your own code or when you're able to modify exploits. And I would say to people like, what's the difference between like malware and software? Well, it's the malicious intent. And so from a computer side, it's very difficult to define malicious intent, right? And so I often say the best way to write malware that bypasses these things is to just write software. Set out to write software for the OS. Don't set out to write malware. And then you're on the right track, right? You're on a good path. So there's that element to sort of my offensive work. And then in the operations area, because fundamentally my background sort of DevSecOps, and luckily there's a term for that these days, but when I was sort of doing that way back in the day, there wasn't a term for that. It was just a kind of jack of all trades you'd be known as, or dare I say it, full stack developer with, these other traits. But even in operations, right, you're still writing code, whether that's bash scripts to automate stuff, to deploy stuff. So I'd say fundamentally I'm a developer. Then I've got experience in operations and of course security. And my first experience with security was in my own code, right? So I wrote this program that was parsing directories and sort of, running through the file system. And I sort of had this aha moment. I thought, I've written code that's sort of parsing file names. What if I do something, a little bit funny to that file name? And so I had this idea that if I append a thing to a file name, it might achieve an action. And more specifically, that thing was a semicolon, right? And so as everyone knows that sort of works with Linux and terminals, there are these what are known as operators that separate commands or launch another command. And so I think I remember at the time, semicolon /bin/bash. And then I ran my program and, I spawned a shell. And that was an amazing moment. well, firstly, I thought, I've written insecure code. That's not good. But the second part of me was thinking, wow, like, this is possible. And that really started me on what I like to call the rabbit hole, because I think it really is a rabbit hole. Security is hugely vast. There's so many dimensions to it. And we'll touch on that, during this session. But I often like to say security is like a Rubik's Cube, right? There's many moving elements. There's different things to that, whether it's zero-day exploits or configuration issues in infrastructure, social engineering, phishing, et cetera, et cetera. There's so many vectors that it's not black and white. And so security really is a rabbit hole. And down that rabbit hole, I've had the pleasure of a number of roles, from operational security to building security operations centers, writing IDS and software for, what they call now EDR stuff. Again, back in the day, I didn't even know it was EDR. It's just sort of, slightly more lightweight AV, which was interesting. But I've also worked on the red side as well, red teaming with Mike and security testing, pen testing, and a number of roles in between. So I'm quite lucky in the sense that I've seen it from both angles, right? When I see these debates from really technical people against sort of more policy-based people in an organization like your InfoSec team, there's this sort of, no, this is more important or that's more important. Well, actually, I think they're all pretty important. They all play a role. You need the technical assessments, you need your defense in depth, you need these tools, but you also need a process. You need your incident response plan. You need to do your risk assessments, right? You need to do your awareness training, not for the sake of trying to stop people getting phished. That's always going to happen. The right email at the right time always gets through. And I think that's a saying that you always had, right? And I think I got it from you. But, so it's, as I say, I'm lucky that I've had a career that's seen both sides of the table, and everything from underground sort of hacking scenes. I know that we've both sort of got different stories in that domain, right through to the sort of upper echelons of enterprise security, auditing banks, auditing government technologies, stuff like that. And I know you're the same. So yeah, I'm just really thankful to have had a career that has seen those different sides. And I think that's part of what gives me and you that sort of different perspective that we've had when doing research or when giving talks. And sometimes it's even a perspective that people like to disagree with. But I often think, there's nothing to say who's wrong or right. But I think if you don't see it, if you don't see the whole Rubik's Cube, it's hard to really understand it. And an example on that before I hand over would be sort of 0 days, right? When I like exploit development, it's really fun. I like really complex sort of exploit challenges. They're really great. But the fact is, when you look at a lot of the stuff that happens in the wild, it's a social engineering attack, right? And they're using some kind of office macro to launch a Cobalt strike beacon, right? Which is just pretty lame, let's be honest, from a technology perspective, like nothing special there at all, right? Out of the box macros, out of the box Cobalt strike sort of beacons, payloads. It's really uninteresting, really not advanced. And so you sort of realize that, right? That you can be focused on something, but it doesn't mean it represents what really happens out there. And it's nice to sort of think that everything is mega advanced, but I think as we'll cover in this and from our own stories, it's just not the case, right? You don't burn a 0 day vector when the front door is wide open. That's just facts.
Yeah, 100. And it's perspective, isn't it? It's perspective and skill set. So what seems really advanced to other people isn't necessarily really advanced to us. And I think one of the things when we first met was so firstly, we were kind of introduced through a mutual acquaintance, Ryan Dewhurst, who, for those that don't know, runs WordPress Scan. So he's a really, really well-known guy, a really great guy in web app and WordPress scanning, hacking, etc. So firstly, I was impressed that he was impressed by you. So at the time, I'd asked Ryan to do a talk. We're doing some talks with some really, really large clients, and really we needed some different expertise. So the fact that you were kind of recommended from Ryan really, really told me a lot. But then when we first spoke, I was always impressed, I think, and had a lot of respect for how technical you were, but also how different your skill set was to mine. And I think that's why we did so well, which we'll get into in a minute. But for the benefit of those watching, kind of to give you a bit of background on me. So firstly, like you obviously grew up in the 90s, born in 88. So by the time I was like 95, I always say that I think we were kind of the golden age of the internet. So I was born like with an old 486 running Windows 95 with no internet connection. Then all of a sudden we had like dial up, so we had a modem, used to make all the old funny noises and whatever. But kind of when I was like 8, I was exposed to the internet. So all of a sudden it was like, oh my god, like, I've gone from playing theme park and paint to now being on the internet. And it was like Yahoo chat. Like, I always remember like Executive Grapevine and all that. But why I say we're kind of the golden age of the internet is because even people that work for me now don't remember not having the internet. Whereas like we're probably kind of the last generation that do. But if you were 5 or 10 years older than us, then you were kind of in a different realm before us. So I kind of went from like internet to like broadband, high speed broadband, which really was like 256 bit or whatever, 256 kilobit, which is like super, super slow really in comparison. But obviously the web was expanding. So we kind of went from 0 to what we've now got, which was like almost inconceivable. So yeah, I started building computers when I was like 8, and I definitely built my first computer by the time I was 10. My dad was an electromechanical engineer. He was chief electrical officer for P&O, and was also in the RAF before that. So he was kind of deeply technical. He'd always send me bits for computers. So I started building them. So I always had like a deep interest in hardware, and definitely broke a fair few computers before I really nailed it. And so yeah, by the time I'm like kind of 12, 13, 14, really good knowledge of like Windows 95, Windows 98, the massive failure of Windows ME and the rest of it. For those that even remember Windows ME Millennium Edition, because it was so bad, I don't think anyone used it. But yeah, really. And when I was 15, I wrote a tool which could enumerate millions and millions of emails. So I was sending out like 5 million emails a day. Had a bit of a run in with the law, and then it came to that. And really never thought I'd work in computers, if I'm honest. And that's why it's relevant, because then it was kind of like keeping away from computers. I'd got in a fair amount of trouble at school for like a number of things on my school network, which wasn't anything bad, just like zip bombs, ping of death, stuff like that kind of stuff, like fun stuff really, and also like changing stuff. So obviously like back then cross-site scripting was really, really easy, like HTML injection, the rest of it. So and the reason why that's relevant is because like I said, I never thought I'd work in computers. So my brother was a plumber at the time. So when I was 16, I had to get a job, like left school, didn't do A-levels at the time, or really any sort of formal qualification. So qualified as a plumber, and then qualified as a gas engineer. And I thought, actually, I'm like 18, 19, like with an electronics background, I've got a really good grasp of this. So just started smashing it. So I worked for British Gas Commercial, started leading their technical fault finding team. So again, when I talk about us being like the golden generation, we had engineers who really knew their stuff about commercial boilers. So to give people an idea on commercial boilers, what you've got in your home is probably 24 kilowatt. By the time I was like 19, I was qualified to work on 70,000 kilowatt. So boilers that are like bigger than your house, really. And what I found was like, I was working with some really experienced engineers who were like 50, but they didn't want to use a multimeter. And I'd been brought up on a multimeter. So they were still using like bulbs to test for voltage, like really old school methods. So I just said to them, look, you can test resistance through this. Like, you can test continuity. You can do all these different tests and you'll know exactly what's wrong. So that really taught me that everything has a measurement. And so you can measure everything, you can diagnose everything. So yeah, when I was like 20, 21, I started just running these fault finding workshops where we go through like fault finding, whatever. And really that was me. But before that, I had actually tried to work in IT. So I qualified as Cisco CCNA, which wasn't easy. It took a fair amount of time. There wasn't all these online labs and all that. So I qualified in that. Then I got a job at the BBC. And foolishly, after about a week of working there, I told somebody what had happened when I was like 15. So I got called into an office, and I was loving working on that network. I got called into an office, and I was told that the BBC will never have a hacker on their network, as they described it, and to get my stuff, and I was leaving. So after that, I thought, well, I'm never going to work in IT. So I kind of settled into gas, started working there. And then when I was like 20, 21 maybe, this guy, I was in a plant room, so where all the boilers are kept, at Scientific buildings. There's a massive building not far from me. And this guy's there, and he's like pressing buttons, but clearly doesn't really know what he's doing. So I said to him, like, what's that? And he said, oh, this is a BMS system. I said, like, this BMS system? And he was like, it's a building management system. It's controlling this whole building. So I was like, right, give me that hit. So I don't remember sleeping much, if I'm honest. But yeah, brute force attacks was throwing everything at it. And to my knowledge, I was one of the first people to hack the Trend BMS system, which is used in like a massive percentage, probably like 40-50% of buildings. So I just started doing loads of security research into that, like Trend, Carrier, the rest of it. But by then, where I'd worked for British Gas, I was qualified plumber, qualified gas engineer, qualified commercial gas engineer, qualified commercial and high voltage electrician. So like I was kind of that side of it, and then a hacker as well, as people knew. So I started releasing a load of this research online, like white papers and the rest of it on hack forums and whatever. And then yeah, pretty quickly again came to the attention of a number of organisations. So I was like, oh dear. So they were like, look, you're not in any trouble. Will you come and give a talk about what you're doing? So I was like, no. So I went into a big tirade about why like the government were watching us and blah, blah, and whatever. And then after a while, I kind of came around to it and gave a couple of talks about hacking critical national infrastructure. So obviously I was qualified to work on it. It's a really, really good experience. So even then, like, and even now, I say to people in buildings, like a net admin, list every single computer or device you've got in your building. And not one of them has ever listed the BMS system or anything in the plant room. And the mad thing is that it's strapped to the corporate network. So it's like, it doesn't have its own network. So they've effectively got like vertical movement directly from that system, which is easily enumerated, very few defenses, etc. And not one of them has ever listed it. So I just started giving talks on that about how you hack critical national infrastructure, so the water supply, electrical supply, gas systems, etc. Started working on GNOs, gas network operations, so like the gas grid and the rest of it. And then really from that, it was people in those agencies that said, look, did you know there's a qualification for this that you can do? A certified ethical hacker. And I was like, no, there's always a qualification you can do for hacking. And they were like, yeah, why don't you do it? So I went and did it. And there was someone there, and I'm happy to name this organisation actually. So there was someone there from Thames Water. And we sat in this class, and they said the first thing, right, we're going to use Linux. And her question was, what is Linux? And I was like, oh, God, like it's going to be like this like the whole week. So that whole week, I was like enumerating everyone. Obviously, it was internal IP addresses. Was like enumerating people's systems, like spoofing their IP addresses, like scanning stuff, throwing exploits at them. And the instructor's like looking at the computer. He's like, or at the network, and he's like, what's going on? It's like someone's hacking loads of stuff. And yeah, I met a really good guy there who used to be the principal officer, lead investigator for the Met Police. And from that, kind of was exposed to a load of different stuff. I know if you remember, Matt, we met him at King's Cross and went through some stuff for him. It was really interesting.
Yeah, good guy.
Yeah, and then really from that, just started working with like I say, specific organisations on critical national infrastructure, which now, don't get me wrong, the government have upskilled massively. So now we've got the NCSC, etc. There's a lot of really, really good people. But back then, it was a minefield, really. And I'm only talking like 2011, 2012. So it's actually quite mad to see where these organisations have gone within like the last 8 years. It's mad. Like they've really, really upskilled. But yeah, kind of did that. And I worked for a pen testing company on national infrastructure and also on industrial control systems. So some of our clients we could talk about are people like Warburton's and really big pigs. You got to think they've all got gas driven systems. So they've all got like massive bakery units that are all gas driven. And there's not one person that's qualified to like test the industrial control systems on it that can also work on that kit. So yeah, really interesting. So I had quite a good role there. Worked in pen testing for a couple of years on all different kind of organisations, and then started INSINIA. So then went out on my own. Guy that I worked with, she had a heart attack. His daughter took the company over. She didn't do very well with it. To be honest, totally untechnical. So I thought it's probably time to go out on my own. And at the time, we were getting paid loads of money because I think what we were doing was so cutting edge and like we were really at the forefront of it. We were getting paid quite a huge amount of money really to do talks, just flying all over the world, giving talks. And then somebody wanted us to do more stuff on web app, which obviously now I understand a bit about my background wasn't really my thing. So that's when I went to Rhyme. That's when he introduced us. And yeah, really, we just hit it off straight away. So to tell everyone a bit more about that. So when you came over, I think the first talk we gave was at the Bulgari Hotel in Knightsbridge.
Yeah, for F5, right?
Yeah, for F5, which is like a multi-billion-pound organisation. So for people that don't know how that industry kind of works, like if you're going to take like F5 or Fortinet or any of these big companies into your organization, you have a salesperson who will obviously sell it to you. Then you have someone that's called sales support. So they're technical. So they'll look at your infrastructure and say, right, okay, well, you've got this at the moment. Then you've got like Cisco here or Sophos there or whatever. We'll come in, we'll replace that. We'll do this. We'll put these switches and settings on and whatever. And then they kind of like engineer the solution to work out what you need to buy. So in this room, there's like all these sales support people and we're talking about like ways that we would hack F5. So when I first gave a talk at F5, they were like, yeah, but our email's secure. So I was like, okay, so who's going to offer up an email address? And they were like, actually, what's the problem? It's doing like network attacks, using things like Desploit and all these. There's different tools, really. We're just understanding stuff, like just running rings around them. So that led to us getting a number of these talks. And the point I'm making really is that these talks were for technical people. And I remember, Matt, when you got on stage, like you were, I think so you were off the back of the Alexa 1 million domains research, which we'll talk about in a second. I was, so we were both quite well known in the hacking community. I'd done quite a lot of safe hacking, which I'll put some links to, and some hardware hacking, which actually is nothing compared to what we did together, which we'll talk about as well. But at the time, I remember you got on stage, and I just thought, this is awesome, like for me. But I thought, like, this is super technical, and even the technical people in multi-billion-pound companies were just like, oh my god, like in awe of what we were saying, and that really launched us into like this whole kind of arena of talks. So like giving talks for Fortinet, F5, Barclays. Remember that time we did at Barclays where we met Akande and the rest of it. So we were, I think that we were kind of like I wouldn't say like the golden boys, but like we were like the people in cybersecurity that was like, yeah, if you want to really understand the real threat, then get them out of mic. And like it was an awesome time, really. So we were giving a lot of talks and stuff like that, doing a lot of stuff together, traveling the world together. So confidence was really, really good, which we'll talk about as well. And I'll let you tell that story in a sec. But yeah, really just kind of like blowing the doors open on the cybersecurity industry. And just to touch on something that you said, I think like what I find is that when we were working for some of these organizations, like they're very focused on what they do. So, for example, like security company specializes in malware detection. Well, guess what they want to talk about all the time? When really, like CEO fraud isn't really something that they're looking at, and it's kind of out of the realms of their capability. So you say to them about CEO fraud, and they're like, "Well, yeah, that's not something we know much about, but I think we've got a guy that takes care of that." And you're like, "Well, actually, no, you don't have a guy that takes care of that."
That's the biggest red flag. We got a guy that takes care of that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you want to
I know that. Have you told them?
yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm aware of this, but and that's where, like, I think from our perspective, like, we smashed it so much because we like give these talks, and people didn't want to be caught with their trousers down to kind of give that expression. And I remember, like, we were talking after one of the F5 events before the guy tried to get us to work for the Russians. We talked about as well, but we were talking after that to a guy that I remember was like the technical specialist for this company from Israel, and really knew his stuff. And they're like, whenever anyone comes up to you and they're like, yeah, you spoke about this, and how does that work? Whenever they give that expression, you think, oh, like, dubious about what we said. And I don't think there was ever a question whether that was like in Poland, someone from the NSA or somebody from like these huge organizations that approached us with that between us we couldn't answer. And I think that's why we smashed it so much, really. So yeah, interesting time. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree. And honestly, like the thing you mentioned about the BMS systems, I still use that today. I have this example. I've got an empty office building, and then I say, what can you hack here? And everyone says nothing. So we're missing the thing, right? The BMS system that's there in the wall that is connected around the building, connected to the internet. And I always think as well, like on touching on that, you said like people don't understand the computers that they have. Also, that extends to an even deeper level. People don't understand the sort of microcontrollers or the CPUs that you have inside products, right? Like take a medical device, an MRI scanner. There's not just one computer in there. Yeah, there's a fundamental one you might interface with to gain initial access, but in each electronic arm or element, there could be a microcontroller, which is running some kind of firmware, which is running some kind of operating system at some point. And so, yeah, even if you look at Mercedes-Benz, I haven't looked at them for years and years, but way back, there was like more than a couple of Linux servers, different ones running in the same vehicle. And that's a more higher level one. But you're absolutely right. Like people definitely don't understand where these things reside or how you interface with them. And what I think was most interesting about your background is that sort of physical world. As you say, the electromechanical engineering, and it's like. We were able to conceptualize Stuxnet-like attacks because, once you're able to gain that low-level execution of code, really the next step to understanding how to make a big impact in the physical world is having someone like you, right? So no doubt the people that put together Stuxnet is not just a case of having digital or cyber experts who write the exploit. It's about having electromechanical engineers or chemical engineers and people that understand if you rotate this much quicker, stuff happens. If you mix these chemicals, things happen. And so that was really interesting. And one thing I think we both noticed is that, and I know we both noticed this because we even had a graph that we used, and sort of like, you know, we had sort of like the OT and the IT, operational technology or ICS and classic IT. But if you abstract away sort of further than that and you have sort of the cyber and the physical, there often isn't too much interaction, right? You have those CCTV systems, which, you know, someone at the gate is watching. You might have some access control gates, and then you've got your cyber systems. But more than ever, these systems are interconnected, or you can actually move from one to another, or you can disable physical access control or physical cameras with cyber attacks or cyber payloads, and vice versa. You can kill cyber systems via an attack, right? Like a legitimate, and Wheels had a line. We say like a legitimate attack. You know, hey, you're vulnerable to someone walking up and dousing your building in petrol and setting it on fire. That is true, right? But there has to be a point. But if you just sort of allow your mind to think like that for a second, is you know, you've got a box or you've got a server, and I know we used to joke about this, but if you want the data on it, sometimes the best thing to do is steal that server, right? Because the laws around theft and breaking and entering are much less than the laws on hacking. So that might be your best option. And as a criminal, you weigh up the risk reward. You know, conversely, if you gain access to a building and their computer system or their security system is there, I mean, you could take a hammer to it and destroy it, right? It's super crude, but it's effective, right? It's not going to work. So, I mean, I think, you know, the reason why we were always able to sort of take it to that next level is seeing where those two elements interact. I really like the research you did with the rare earth neodymium magnet, right? And the stuff on the safes. You know, why don't you talk about that for a second? Because I think that's a great example of manipulating secure things via like relatively crude techniques that are hyper effective. So what's behind that? How does that work?
Yeah, cool. So I'll stick a couple of links into the description as well. I think the first time I hacked a safe really was with a safe that was, so basically tell you a bit about the way safes work is that when you put a PIN code in, you then turn a handle, which opens the safe. So I kind of looked at it and I thought, okay, well, what's opening the safe? Well, I'm opening the safe when I'm turning the handle. So what's allowing me to turn that handle? Putting a PIN code in, obviously. So straight away I thought, okay, so this is an electric circuit, really, an electronic circuit, which is doing something which is allowing me to turn that handle. Yeah, so that's kind of as far as I got with that. So then I looked into it and I thought, well, how would I build that? Before I even looked at the safe, well, how would I build that? And I thought, well, straight away, an electromagnetic solenoid. So I'd make it so that it's got kind of a pin that's up, and then you put the code in, pin drops down, that then clears the way, and you can open the handle. So it's like, right, okay, took one apart, and sure enough, that's what it is. So literally a little electromagnetic solenoid. I understand that well because it's a gas valve. So in commercial gas, you have these big valves, they're safety cutoff valves, and they're linked to things like the fire alarm system. So they're almost called a safety interlock. So if the fire alarm goes off, gas valve shuts. Yeah, so it's a normally closed circuit. When it gets power, it's open, or the other way around. So it's open and allows gas through. As soon as that circuit's interrupted by an interrupter, such as a fire alarm or the flue fan's gone off or whatever, then it drops that solenoid down. So that's literally as technical as it is. It's an electromagnetic solenoid and it lifts a slug or a valve up and down. So I started looking at safe and I thought, right, okay, well, there's ways to do this. So I could jump it with voltage, you know, so stick a current through it. That'll launch the electromagnetic solenoid and it'll work and whatever. And the first one I did, I actually found out you didn't even have to do that. You just bang it. So you bang the top of it hard enough. And because it's a spring-loaded slug, it drops down. So if you time it, you can bang it and turn it. And even though, like, people say it's unbelievable, so I'll post a link to the first video I did, which is years old now. It's like the best part of a decade old. And I actually got in a fair amount of grief for that because I filmed that on my work iPad when I was working for this pen testing company. And then somebody else used my iPad and they were like, you've been hacking safes on the work iPad. And they were like, it was done at like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You should have been at work. So I was like, well, kind of was at work because it's like pen testing. But so I did that. And then I put that video out and everyone was like, yeah, well, that's great, Mike. But it's like a £50 crappy safe. So I was like, all right, okay, challenge accepted. So I used to go, well, I still go to Costco all the time. I saw that Costco had a Sentry safe. Looked at it, same thing. You put a pin code in, turn the handle, doing job done. So I thought the same thing is going to work again. So I didn't actually buy that safe, and I wasn't earning huge amounts of money then. So I took this rare earth magnet, took it to Costco, safe was locked, and stuck it on the Costco safe, and sure enough, it opened up. And my friend was there filming it. It was a 30-second clip, so I'll stick it in the description. And the safe opened. So responsible disclosure, then obviously I went to Sentry, who make the safe, and I said, look, I've just hacked your safe in Costco with a magnet and a sock. And people say, well, why the sock? Well, you need the sock to get the magnet off because the magnet's so strong. If you haven't got a sock there, then you'll try pulling the magnet off, and it's got a 300 kilogram pull. So you need to put 300 kilograms on it to get it off. So so I said, yeah, I've just hacked your safe with a magnet and a sock. Oh, and by the way, there's a video online if you want to see it. So they were like, yeah, well, that's great, but that's becoming our older model now. We're releasing another model. So it's okay. So tried it again, didn't work on the newer model. So I thought, that's the end of that then. So I bought the newer model, and this is the next video that you can see, which is on my Twitter. They're both on my Twitter at Shiva. I'll post links to this one as well. So stuck the magnet on it, didn't work. But then I thought, this can't be far off doing getting that pin down because it's so simple the way it works. So I just tip the safe forward, tip it back, and bang, it's unlocked. And Sentry were like, oh dear. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and that's still the safe that you can buy. So people were like, oh, what are you saying? Don't use the safe. And no, I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying understand the limitations of this technology. They're predominantly good for fires. Now, so if you've got important documents or anything like that, they're fireproof for like an hour. But there's definitely no way that I could say that those safes are secure. How could I when I've just gone in there with a magnet and opened it? So again, it's understanding the technology and what it does. And it's the same thing. Look, if you want to burn a building down, go and stick a magnet on top of the gas valve and you'll stop that valve closing. And it's as simple as that. So you have to understand the risk. And I think this is where we smashed it so much. So we were working in an ICS testing lab that was the biggest ICS testing facility in the UK. And Matt and I went there and we spent a couple of days going through things. And there's a video on this as well. So I'll show you so I'll put a video link in the description. And I remember like how much progress we made so quickly. And in fact, like, so we kind of went through the stuff and like the technology. And I remember explaining to you, like, this is what like this does and this is the hardware and whatever. And you were like, oh, it's probably running that. Or like, I remember you got access to that old, like, I can't remember what version of Windows it was, but it was like an old school, like.
Yeah. I had to write, I joked about it because I said the exploit development here was basically software development where I had to, backport and support an old, OS because I could get the shell, but it just wasn't hanging about. It was like, so that was really interesting as well, right? Like, again, as you say, it's about understanding things. From my point, it's just about coding. Sometimes you have to take the hacking mindset off it. But as you're saying.
Yeah. So and that was, I remember like that for us was like unbelievable. And then we were staying in the hotel. So we used to go and stay away at this place like quite often. And we were sitting in the car. I would never forget it. Like we were sitting in a McDonald's car park. And we were like, yeah, what if we do that? And then what if we do this? And what if we do that? And what we'd actually built was an ICS security system, like in that car park. And then the next day, like we contextualized it, tested it, and just absolutely smashed it. And we worked out that we could stop that process for like less than like $30. And we worked out like ways of getting in there. So one of the things that you said was like about like building access management, so BAM as it's known, and like access control systems and that kind of stuff. And when I was on a pen test before, we were like, right, okay, what are we going to do? So we rocked up and there was the guest book there, like the signing in book of all the people that have been in. We didn't know who the facilities management company were, who the engineers were or anything. And I looked in it. And again, I took because they're a huge company that managed loads. Their facilities management company was a company called CBRE, who are massive. They were like huge FM company. So we walked in, obviously with gas, well, I'm a gas engineer, so I dressed as gas engineer with all the tools and whatever, walked up to the receptionist who, when you think a receptionist is totally responsible for who accesses that building, pretty crazy, really. So I was like, hi, and literally at a glance, I looked and I was like, hi, I'm here from CBRE to go to your plant room. And she was like, all right, okay. So straight away, called the security guy. It's just quite a secure site. Called the security guy down. And he was like, right, where do you need to go? So I said to him, no, we're doing an emergency lighting test, so I need to get into every room in this building. So he was like, oh, okay, right, well, I'll come with you. So he started scanning us into these rooms, which are like meeting rooms, offices, like cleaning cupboards, everything. And after about 25 minutes, he's like, you actually got to go into every room. And I was like, yeah, I know, it's nice, boring for you as it is, whereas for me as it is for you. So in the end, he gave me his security card. So now I've got like admin access, basically to everything. I've got a security guard's access card. So he was like, yeah, just drop it at reception when you're done. I've got loads of them. So I was like, cool. So naturally, the first place I went was the server room. So I've like gone there, and even then, like you've got IT guys that are like not like walking around me, but having a look, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's just like the idiot gas engineer. What does he know?" And I'm looking at this, thinking like, "Oh well, that's like Cisco XXX or whatever," and like looking at everything, just enumerating everything in my head, and thinking perfect injection point, whatever. So like I'm thinking like I'm walking around your server room, I'm on a pen test. I'm walking around your server room, and I've not had to do anything. You've given me the card, and so if you say that to an organisation, they wouldn't believe it. And then when I've worked in like industrial control system environments, on one pen test, we actually took the whole guest book. So we took the whole guest book with us. They didn't know. So it's like we've now got a record of every single person that's gone in there, what companies people are dealing with. So for example, like if you take that book and then you see that somebody from Raytheon has gone in there, or Lockheed or Northrop Grumman or whatever, straight away, like you've got the names of the people at defense contractors that they're working for. And people don't think that, it's just a guest book. So it's like, it's crazy what you get access to.
It's a good social engineering information gathering step, right? Like you could easily email someone at one of these companies, like that person at Raytheon, and say, "Hey, I'm from the facilities management company. You were here last Thursday around 4:00. I saw that you were, doing whatever, or you have this sort of pretext. Check this out, download this, or hey, we had some suspicious activity. Do you recognize these people?" And obviously that's a link to something more malicious or the next stage.
Yeah.
You just never know the kind of information you're leaking. I mean, a similar story with you and I that I'll never forget, and I won't name names here, but as you know, we did a lot of talks and consulting for sort of counterterrorism and public safety, road safety, this kind of stuff. I remember we went to one of the world's largest manufacturer of security solutions, right, that serve, customers like Department of Homeland Security and the Ministry of Defense and the, what was it, SEAL Team 6, or, I mean, it was just the top of the top, right? And I remember we arrived there together, pulling up, and we just said, we had a sign-in procedure. It wasn't a pen test, but given the fact that we're there to consult on counterterrorism issues, it wouldn't be right if we didn't try and hustle our way in. So, I remember that they had a lot of cameras, a lot of access control gates, these sort of stuff. The first one was bypassed by tailgating. I remember you were driving, you tailgated someone into the parking lot, all right? Check one. Second one, I remember going in and telling the receptionist, I've been traveling hours here to meet, this so on and so forth, but I really need to go to the bathroom, right? I can't wait. And I remember the receptionist letting us through the secure gates, right, which arguably were pretty impenetrable because they're full on sort of floor to ceiling glass, sort of multi-stage access control. You couldn't just sort of slip past that, but they would gladly let you pass. Toilets that way. Toilet happens to be next to the door of the manufacturing facility in the firmware development room, right? And I remember that we got to that point, we even got through the door into that area by the firmware room and really just sort of proved the concept that with minimal effort, arguably, a couple of tailgatings, a bit of a blag, not even really social, hey, I need the toilet, that we were able to gain access. And had we been had malicious intent, it would have been simple to do that kind of thing, which is I get that would fall under your sort of supply chain attack, which is I guess interesting given what's happened recently with SolarWinds. But that's part of what I used to do in operational security is audit these third parties on behalf of the person I was working for, the client, and look at these operations, and see stuff like that, right? Like, the receptionist should never let you through, Sorry, but you're gonna have to hold it or suffer the consequences. But I'm not letting you through the gate. And things like tailgating, it shouldn't be possible. Arguably as well, it shouldn't be possible for adversaries to slip code into your source code or to your build, right? I mean, you can. There's simple ways to check a difference between this and that. There's other ways to verify these things. So I mean, the fact is, if we sort of wrap it up into a main point from our experiences, is there's always a way in, right? Even if someone is sort of 10 out of 10 on the network security stuff, then most likely the best thing is to turn up on site, right? Or that manufacturing facility that they've got in Norway that everyone forgets about, or it's their sort of, but it's still an entry point into the network. I mean, I remember testing a large sort of Swedish furniture store. I won't name names. I'm sure you can imagine who it is. And so much work went into securing the first level of all the payment gateways and the POS systems. You couldn't really exploit that. Even the cables, they had secure cables that ran into the ceiling. All the server rooms had the signs taken off, access control, tick, tick, tick. Except on the second floor where you plan your kitchens, right? And those workstations that you sort of query your own products. Well, no one thought to check if you could ping that other network, if it was flat. And no one thought to lock those down and harden them. So it was simply a case of plugging in, our tool to exploit the network on the second floor, literally a story up. And arguably that's even better because no one's watching it, no one's around, there's no cameras about. And the same thing, I remember auditing a supplier for the MOD, and they had this guy that had been working for the MOD for a long time, and he locked down Windows boxes like I've never seen. It was amazing the configuration he did. It was absolutely brilliant. Couldn't fault it. Couldn't fault anything they did. Amazing. And so I think it was like the fourth, pretty much the last day of the test, and I was or the audit, and I was getting frustrated. I was like, we've always got something on people. There's no one's ever got away clean. But I had a feeling that these guys were going to do it, and that they were doing really well. But I thought, hang on a second, what happened? I checked the fire escape, right? So I remember walking around the back of the building, and I saw these double gates which led to a trash area, right? And when I was inside the trash area, I looked at the door, and it just so happened that at the time the lock was broken, so it was left open for people to come out and have a cigarette. So it ended up being that you can hire the best of the best, pay them 200 grand a year to lock your systems down setting by setting. But if no one's checked the back door, quite literally, then it arguably, there's something missing there that you've got to check. And I think it's kind of like, people will always exploit the least path of resistance or just the easier vector. I think for the more advanced stuff, because an organization that big, there's always that way in. There isn't.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, do you know what's really interesting as well is I'd actually totally forgotten about that visit, but that's when we were in Wales doing the research, and we went off. Do you remember, for like half a day to go to that secure manufacturing place, and it was impressive. As I have to say, it was impressive. But when we went in there, and this like brings back so many memories. Like, do you remember they had a like direct overhead camera, and and we walked under it to go to the toilet, and then they had it on a screen. So I was like, what they're showing you is A, all the blind spots to the camera, and B, that camera is only getting the top of our heads. So they can't identify anyone from that at all. So it was unbelievable. But then we went into that room, and we kind of like, we'd given a talk, and they were like, oh yeah, so you guys are hackers and whatever. And we were like, well, no, we're pen testers, whatever. And do you remember it was a demo room, and there was a guy from the flying squad that had investigated, I think it was the Brinks Mat robbery or the Heathrow one. Yeah. And he was actually quite a good and quite an interesting guy. But there was a guy from this company there. So really, we're there because they're trying to sell our colleagues all this stuff. So he's showing us stuff, and they make like secure key stores for prisons. Do you remember? And they had like all the keys, and it pulls the keys in and whatever. But so I said to him, okay, what about if there's a fire? And they were like, oh yeah, it's fail-safe. So what you find on a lot of these systems is that they're what's called fail to open. So when they fail, they automatically open. So all the keys will come out. So if there's a fire, you don't have to say, oh, Paul, where's the code for this? Do you know what I mean? We've got people burning alive in prison cells. So they fail to open. So a lot of stuff does that. And so he was like, oh yeah, well, if there's a fire, we do this. So I said, okay, so what about, so with switching like that, it's always voltage or just current. So when there's a fire, that makes a micro switch, that sends a current to this key store, that tells it to open. So I said, okay, so what about if we plug this into it, like battery, capacitor, whatever? And he was like, well, yeah, we'd think there's a fire. So it's like, so it would open. And he was like, yeah. So then, like, and we looked at like another thing, and we were like, yeah, so what about if we stuck a mag? So one of the things I always remember is a mag lock. You know, like the two locks, they're plates and they go together like that. So I was like, so what about if we stick some coins in it? And he was like, well, yeah, that would stop it locking sufficiently.
Well, there you
Like,
go. And
so I would have tried. And we went around everything, and we just literally like not just picking holes in it, but just being sensible and saying, look, like you're talking about supplying these to our clients that have got high value assets, which you're saying you can protect. But in reality, like there's a load of attacks for this that you haven't thought of or you haven't mitigated. So we kind of did that. And I remember he was a bit disheartened. Then he took us over to their secure manufacturing facility. And we were going around and he scanned the door. And I remember saying at the time, there's a tool out called the Boz Cloner, which then like turned into a few different tools and whatever. But the Boz Cloner was for cloning RFID systems. So I said to him, are they susceptible to cloning? And he was like, I don't know. So I was like, that's probably a yes then. So so then we're walking around and he's like showing us around all their facility. I was thinking, this is crazy. Like, you don't know us. We haven't been properly vetted. And we've just given a talk on hacking. Now you're walking us around your secure facility. And I remember we were like, yeah, well, what about like if we did this? And I remember I had some Alan Bradley stuff, which was the stuff that we were hacking back in Wales. So I was like, well, what about this and what about that? And he was just like, oh yeah. And he was like, yeah, but how would you get in here though? And I was like, you're walking around here. Dude, how would we get in? You've brought us through the front door, literally. So like what people don't realize is that they're just allowing us to enumerate all that stuff. And yeah, that was a great experience. I don't know what happened with that and if they ended up getting that contract. But also the point was, well, it wasn't just like, oh, look how great we are, we're picking holes in this. It was sensible. So like you said, we looked at things and thought, well, look, what's feasible? What might actually happen? Doing like the inside threat, for example, like in prisons, we know there's a lot of corruption in prisons. If somebody in a prison takes a picture of that key store and gives that to a criminal, and bear in mind, a lot of these criminals are highly resourceful, then yeah, they could find vulnerabilities and exploits in that quite easily. So I kind of put it on them and said, what have you done to mitigate it? Like, we know there's an inside threat. We know this could happen. We know that these systems are safety interlocked. What have you done? And I was quite shocked that their response was, well, nothing really. Like, we build a solution, we build it so it's okay, and we charge money for it. And I was like, oh, God, right, yeah. That's
I think it's a really interesting point there, right? And of well, firstly, about the systems themselves. I remember the former head of the NSA gave a talk at DEF CON, I think it was, a black hat. I remember him saying, like, what's the difference between like our ops team and your ops team, and why do we gain access to these networks? Because we fundamentally understand the technology better than you do. And I know that for myself, like from a software network pen testing point of view, the amount of systems, I literally, I think I found a 0 day on a test once because I was trying to debug some deserialization thing and was like, I didn't realize I was on a new path. I thought I was just debugging this sort of previous exploit. It turns out I found a new thing. But that's like the only time on a test, right? The other times, haven't even had to rely on CVEs or exploits, right? Like most time I use CVEs and public exploits is on things like Hack the Box, right? Whereas in a real world enterprise, most of the time you can gain access through configuration issues, right? Like if you know Tomcat Manager, right? If you know how to deploy the right file on that system, there you go. Jenkins server, same thing. Configuration in like Redis cache, same thing. Configuration in sudo and file permissions and directory permissions and blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. There's a million and one ways to screw up your system, right? And to configure it badly. And so, but the key to exploiting that is to understand it, understanding the system deeply, both how it actually works and also how the person who built it thinks it works. Because there's a disconnect between the two, right? There's the person who built it thinks it works in a certain way, but in reality, it actually works perhaps 90% like they think it works, but there's for sure 10% that has this anomalous behavior or sort of outlier, sort of ways of functioning that are hard to predict or hard to spot, especially if you don't have that experience. So it's about understanding those systems, which is where I think, your experience came into play there in pointing these things out. And it's difficult for them to understand. The flip side to that is a lot of these people that they were selling to, like DHS or like the MOD, they are going to face adversaries that will spend the time to build something like this, which arguably isn't even that much time. So, there is no sort of reason why they can't and why they don't and why they wouldn't build it. But beyond that, if someone's exploiting something that A, you don't even think is possible, but B, if you don't think it's possible, then I'm assuming B, you're definitely not able to monitor if it's happening, right? And so with those two being true and someone exploiting it, arguably, you're not even going to be able to catch it or detect it. And I know that we've joked about this before because everyone knows the hackers have been arrested or the people that have been caught or the intelligence operations have been busted. But how about all the ones that have never come to light or that got, carried off without a hitch or without an issue? So it's like, yeah, there's unreported breaches, which is totally different to undetected, unknown, covert, got away with it, never heard anything from it again because it was so brilliantly executed. No one had a chance. And there is this whole sort of section that people just don't think exists because it's hard to comprehend that area because A, they're probably doing stuff that you don't understand, and B, they're getting away with it and you can't detect it. So it's but while that remains true, the other side to it is that's not always the way forward, right? And I think, as I said at the beginning, even if you are a powerful adversary, you're not going to burn that advanced technique if the front door's open, right? You're going to have, as we did, you have an array of tools, the right tool in the right scenario. Sometimes
done, 100%.
Yeah, and I think that's the most important thing as well. You just mentioned the objective is the objective, and I think that's what whenever we sat down with clients, and still today when I talk to this about people, they say, we've got to defend everything. I say, well, hang on a second, have a think about areas impact your business most, because I think the most important thing with security and operational security, cybersecurity, physical, is impact on operations, right? If your manufacturing process stops, that's bad for business. You're losing money. If you're a payment provider and your customers' account details or money gets stolen, that's bad for business. 100%. If you're a self-driving car and it gets hacked and someone crashes someone into a side of the road and they die, that's bad for business. So but if you're a self-driving car and someone hacks your payment gateway, it's probably not going to impact your business much at all because that's not really what you're doing. So you can always say, hey, look, we got hacked on our payment gateway. We're going to change provider. We're going to beef it up. And then it sort of restores trust. So that thing of like business impact, first of all. And then when you look at business impact, then you realize there's 1,001 ways to do it, right? And it's kind of what we did with our, pwned to 4 lines of code, right? Which is we were demonstrating attacks where you would cause physical harm or you would, perhaps even blow stuff up. And I hate to say it, but it's true. But when we presented that to the C-suite or high levels, people say, oh, that's great. But, human loss of life is a sort of cost of business sometimes. If you're operating in some of these regions around the world, that's totally factored into business. Someone falls off a cliff or dies on a crane or dies in a factory. That's just, another tally in the book. There's sad to say, but it's unfortunately that's true. So, we thought there has to be another angle, and the other angle's cash, right? Every company cares about cash because, cash is king. You wouldn't be in business if you didn't care about cash, right? So we make that assumption. And with that said, when you look at the same manufacturing sites, it's no longer about trying to kill people on the production line. It's about trying to lose the money, right? Which is about stopping the manufacturing process and shutting down operations. So I think that's where we've always been able to identify those things because first of all, you put yourself in the mindset of what you're trying to achieve, right? If you're looking to ransom the business, that's totally different. You're going to exploit different vectors than if you want to gain intelligence, or maybe you just want to disrupt the organization. Maybe you want to lose them advertising spend. I think what's interesting here, Mike, is there's a whole area of hacking that people don't even really talk about. And that's sort of hacking of corporate espionage, right? If you've got a competitor and they're paying like £80 a click, well, someone's going to hire a team to put together bots to click them out of a budget or to spam their customers somewhere else or to disrupt their operations and make them look bad. So there's this whole area of hacking where you don't even know, because I feel like one thing that people think, especially nowadays with ransomware, is people are confident. I know when I'm hacked because I'm going to turn up and there's going to be binary rain or skull and bones, and it's going to say you've been hacked.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a chunk of it. But as I said, there's that whole other chunk where arguably something's happened you don't even know. Like if you look at, I won't name a name, but there's a certain nation state has an intelligence section of their operations that's just about disinformation and almost like gaslighting. Their sole purpose is to rumble adversaries psychologically, right? Sow distrust, make them look bad. More about PR, about that. This kind of sort of very fine tactical operational disruption through very discrete hacking techniques, right? And so it's just one of many. It goes back to the Rubik's cube. There's just so many sides and moving parts to it
Yeah.
that it's definitely difficult to manage. I have sympathy with the people that defend it, but like I said,
It's impossible.
just decide what has the most impact first, right?
And defense in depth. Yeah, and that's so vital. So like I think what a lot of people think is, oh well, I've got AV or I've bought this firewall, so yeah, I'm absolutely fine. And in reality, it's so different to that, and you just don't know what's going to happen. And so, for example, like one of the things that you mentioned there is IOCs, so indicators of compromise. And I remember one of my friends called me once, a guy called James, and he'll be happy to talk about this. I know he's given talks on it, but he used to work for HMRC. This wasn't at HMRC at the time, but he was a really, really capable guy who really knew his stuff. And he called me once, and this was like 2014 maybe. And he was like, mate, have you still got that thermal imaging camera? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, can you come down? Because I'm sure that my servers are getting really, really hot. So I went down to his data center, took pictures of it, and sure enough, the CPUs were really hot, but everything that he had was all reporting those CPUs were like standard sort of temperature. But he was like, I know they're hot, and he knows the kit. So anyway, in the end, he was like, that kind of validates what I was saying. And he found that there was a seriously stealthy rootkit, which was mining Bitcoin. So what it was doing was it was looking for usage of the system. And as it was sleeping, so when it wasn't doing much, it was ramping it right up to mine loads of Bitcoin. As soon as it sensed the mouse jiggle, then that was it. We'd just kill it off, then go into like a normal state, and then everyone could use the server as normal. So obviously it's like virtualizing loads of machines, so everyone's using it. During the day, absolutely fine. As soon as it gets to later on or where there's no usage, then straight away mining Bitcoin. So when people talk about like indicators of compromise or, oh, I've got this, I've got that, that was one of the best attacks that I've seen. So it was largely non-malicious, wasn't stealing any data. It was using computing power. People can argue, oh yeah, but it's costing them electric. Okay, it was costing them electric, but doing it wasn't doing anything like really, really dangerous, really, in my opinion. And that I thought was really good, really well written. And it was mutual respect, really. You got to think that these people are people like us on the other side of it, but what they'd written was actually a really, really impressive tool. And I know James thought the same. And it was kind of almost a bit gutting to kick him out, to be honest, when he did. But it was like, it's this thing like people don't know. The other thing that I say about is the time. So again, like indicators of compromise. What happens when you come in and all the times are different on your computer? Well, that's if you've got any capable hacker, that's one of the first things they'll do is change the time. And the reason why they do that is because then when you present your evidence to a court, if you want to take it to court or whatever, then where your time's been changed, sometimes to the future, you have to say to a judge, yeah, I was hacked on the 1st of December, 2025. And he's like, okay, well, that doesn't match up. So then all of your evidence is kind of knocked out of it being presentable because none of the times match up. So you can't say when you were hacked. You can't say what time that was or what happened, and none of your logs match. So it's really difficult. So when people talk about indicators of compromise, really, you never know. And one of the really interesting ones I remember and what you were talking about was on a pen test, I've never not got the objective. So we've never not achieved what we set out to do. And I've never been caught. I'm close to it a few times, but never ever have I been caught. And I've done a fair few pen tests now. And I remember when we went to Confidence in Krakow, and that to me was one of the best events that we've done, I think. So I think you got there because you'd flown in, and then I flew in separately because I was doing something else. And when I got there, you were kind of there already. And we got there and we met a guy. So a guy that I still speak to, who I hold in really, really high regard. So he's ex-Mossad, really, really capable guy. We met two guys there that worked together. I don't say too much more about it, but you could tell through speaking to him. Like, do you remember we walked down to that food stall and we were having a chat and it was like technical this, technical that, like Krav Maga. And we got on really, really well. And like I said, I still speak to him now, and this was a few years ago. And we were chatting to him. and he was very much on like the malware software, nation state, like remote hacking, that kind of stuff. And we were like, man, we bust your room. And he was like, nah, he's like, there's no way you'd get into my room. Do you know what I mean? And he's like, he's ex-Mossad, so really knows his stuff. And we were like, right, okay. So
Challenge accepted.
yeah, that's it. Yeah, another challenge. So we were like, okay, what can we do? Because it could be quite serious. He's got a lot of research on his laptop doing. So we thought we've got to be sensible with what we do. So we thought, let's just get into the room, snap a picture, doing, and that's it, job done. So I remember we were, I can't remember, I think we were just scoping everywhere out. So we went down into a fire escape. And it's weird. It was quite weird, actually, because I don't think I've ever been into a building that's like this. But we got to the bottom, and there's a door, and that's it. So there's no way out. And by then, the door had shut behind us on like the third floor, and it was a one-way entrance door. So you need a card to get back through that door. So we were effectively stuck in a stairwell. So we got to the bottom, and we kind of looked for like a few seconds. And you gave a great talk on this actually at B-Sides when we did the poem with 4 lines of code, how we lost our client £1.6 million in 2 hours. Like you say, hitting them in the wallet. So it was really interesting research. And I remember you using this in that talk. And we got to the bottom of this stairwell. And there's a numbered keypad, and we're in a different country. Yeah, so totally different country, totally alien environment. And we looked on it, and do you remember the 1 and 2 were rubbed out? So we were like, right, okay, so the code for that keypad involves a 1 and 2. So I did like 1, 2, 1, 2. Sure enough, the door opened. So I heard like doors open. So we opened it, and it took us into a kitchen. Do you remember? And I'll never forget, like we opened the door. And as we open the door, there's like, you can hear plates like crashing about and everything. So it's an operational kitchen in a big, like 5-star hotel. And we open the door and there's a cork board. And on the cork board, there's a lanyard with a card, a blank card. So we were like, wait, that's interesting. So we basically, I can't remember if we walked through, I don't think we walked through the kitchen at this point. You held the door open. I grabbed that card and then we shut the door, ran back upstairs, got us through the first door, back into the communal area of the hotel. So we were like, sweet. So then we went to this guy's room, buzzed it straight in. It's a skeleton key. It's like a master key into every room. So we were like, mate, it's taken like 4 minutes and that easy. So we opened the door, snapped a picture, and then we went back down. But as we went back down, we put the card back, and I think the door shut behind us. So we were in the hotel kitchen, and we had to like walk through, but the bar was closed. So we walked through the kitchen, and people kind of looked at us, but they weren't expecting us to be there if we shouldn't have been there. So, so we stuck the card back, and this has all happened in like 2 or 3 minutes. Stuck the card back, walked through, then we were in the reception, and they were like, "Oh, hi." I think we went off and like got a massage or something or whatever. So that was it done. So that night we'd seen that guy, and we were like, "Yeah, mate, we busted your room." And he was like, no way. And then we showed him the picture, and he was like, oh man, he's like, yeah, you actually got into my room. And he was like, yeah, fair play. And I think there was like quite a lot of mutual respect from him. Yeah. And that really isn't particularly technical, is it? Do you know what I mean? That was like opportunist, whatever. But the point is, we would have got into that room no matter what. Whether we're in the door, whether we were lucky enough to find that key, whether it's social engineer, the receptionist, whatever it took, we would have got into that room. And it just so happened, really, that it was reasonably simple. And
I remember from that as well, because they said, how'd you do it? And we told them the story, and they said, yeah, but what if the skeleton key wasn't there? And I remember we were talking, and we said, we've been, by this point there, a few days, and we've been going to reception a lot. And I just said, and one of the things that struck me, having worked in operational security, was when you came into the hotel, all the security researchers signed in to on a pad with a clipboard. Yeah. And it had room number, name, all these things. And it was there, but it was on the counter facing you. So I remember day one was like, snap a picture of that, right? Because that's a huge OPSEC fail. Couldn't be any worse. Now every room of all the researchers. And that's actually, from the day one photo, that's how we knew which room to go to, right? We didn't even have to ask him which room it was, because we knew where everyone was staying. And so after that, people were saying, oh yeah, what if you don't find the skeleton key? And me and Mike were talking, and we were saying, all right, well, let's see if you could just do it the vanilla way and socially engineer the reception, as you said. And we walked up and said, hi, I'm, person X, that's not us. We're in this room. We've lost our key. Can we have another one? They just issued a new one. Yeah. So, we sort of in 2 different ways proved that gaining access was utterly trivial. So when you typically that sort of thing's called an evil maid attack, right? And then there's sort of people in the cybersecurity or security industry which say, "Oh, that's never going to happen. Evil-made attacks, they don't happen." I mean, we know that Benjamin Delphi, the creator of Mimikatz, was targeted by intelligence services, right? Because they wanted Mimikatz. And so if I remember correctly, that's what sort of drove him to releasing that as an open source tool. So he wasn't sort of targeted in that way. But I mean, you can bet that if we've even met people at these sorts of events that sort of raise a red flag, right? They say, "Yeah, I'm non-technical. I've got a few questions," and then the questions end up being mega technical. You're like, "Yeah, shut up, you blagger!" Like, there's no way you can get us with that one. But it happens. I think it happens more than people think. People. Again, I know that when I've given OPSEC talks, people say, "Oh, it's not like that. No one threatens you, or you're never going to get sort of put into the back of a car, not the back of a van, but the back of a car. Someone have a chat. You're never going to get a call. But you do, right? And so it depends on what you're doing. Without naming names, I remember the story of the infrastructure testing and the note on the door. Share sort of redacted information on that story, because I think that's a interesting one. Regular pen tester.
Which one? The note on the door? I can't remember.
On the industrial with the knife.
Oh right, that wasn't great. Yeah, to be honest, talking about things like that, I've had a few things like that, and I think one of the big ones. So you were there for this one when I think so. So like the thing where 15-year-old kid hacks TalkTalk, for example, used an SQL injection attack which was older than me, pretty much, or older than him. Yeah, so he used an SQL injection attack, and then people think, "Yeah, I'll be working for the government tomorrow." No, he won't. He hasn't got any amazing skill set. He was lucky. He found like a really low level vulnerability and carried it out, carried out the exploitation, dumped a load of stuff. And I'll get to that thing in a minute. And so people think like there's this misconception, you're going to be working for the government. No, that doesn't happen. What they're looking for is people with like exceptional skills. And I don't know if you remember as well, but when we were in Poland at that event, and shout out to Confidence as well, because they really looked after us, and that was a great time. Yeah. And we went there, and that guy came up to us, and he was like, "Yeah, US intelligence, blah blah blah," and he's like, "We want to know about this and that. Would you consider coming to the US and having a chat with us and whatever?" And I've been approached a few times, as I know you have, but it always seems to be in different countries. Apart from that time where we'd given a talk for a big company in London, and this is how we knew like this guy was an asset. So given a talk for a massive multi-billion-pound company in London, and we were talking to people after, and do you remember that guy was like hanging around? And
it was Stard, wasn't it?
Yeah. And he was like hanging around, and well, you can tell this story if you want.
No, please do.
Oh, look, my DEFCON flag's just fallen. Man, they're onto us.
It's a sign.
So so this guy, he's kind of like lurking around, and this is when we spoke to the guy from Israel. It was super technical. And we'd spoken to a lot of guys. So like there was a really technical guy there who I used to see at every event. He was really good. And we were talking, and he was like, "Yeah, that's really interesting." Talk about like rock chain exploits and all this kind of stuff. And this guy's like waiting, and he's like, "What are you two up to? Do you want to come for a drink?" And we were like, we're just going to go back to we had an Airbnb at the time. And there's some awesome stories as well about our stays in Airbnbs. But we had an Airbnb. So we were like, we're just going to walk back there. It's like a couple of mile walk or whatever. He was like, "Yeah, no worries. I'll come with you." So he came with us, and he was like saying about the time he'd spent in America and the Russians. And he was talking about Russia, and he was like, "Yeah, like massive misconceptions, and they're not bad guys. Got so much money, and if you want to earn loads of money, you should work with them." And we were like, "Yeah, we don't really want to earn loads of money. Do you know what you're saying?" And he was basically trying to recruit us to work for the Russians. So he was like, "Do you want to come for a walk?" And he walked all the way down the river for us, totally different direction as to where he needed to go, and basically spent like 20-25 minutes courting us to work for the Russians. And really, that's because we've got a skill set. So where our skills were so unique, and definitely together where we're so unique, that used to happen quite a lot. So yeah, I think a lot of its value. But I've always obviously I'm not going to work for any nation state that isn't the UK, but I've always purposely tried to stay away from that. You get into really murky ground, like you say with that story, and a lot of places don't want to know. And I think you do have to be careful, because when I was a lot younger and I was working for Veolia, there's a guy there who I won't name, but before we started a pen test, so only 2 people really knew about this test. And one of them was bragging, kind of posturing, saying, you might be able to hack stuff, but I can control every valve in this country from this laptop. And he was showing like the critical valves throughout the country of our critical national infrastructure. And I remember thinking, like, that's a really silly thing to say, because now you just told us we get that laptop. So before you know it, like, one of kind of the plans could have been to grab him, hold him hostage. You know, from pen tests that we've been on before, I used to smash through windows, no problem at all. So like literally just like when we were on that pen test at our ICS environment and we got onto their server, literally like bypassing credentials was no problem at all. Obviously it used to be like booting in Lime, overwriting a sound file or whatever, a system access management file. Don't need to do that anymore. It's pretty simple. So it could have just been grab him, grab his laptop, bang, control of it straight away. So like I've always been quite careful to try not to get involved in that too much, but it has happened a few times, you know, like whether that's been in Poland or here or there or whatever. And people don't like it, really, do they? That's the truth of it. People don't like hearing there's vulnerabilities, whatever. And interestingly, that's why, like, I know obviously we're kind of in the wake of all this SolarWinds stuff. What I was quite interested in is the fact that GCHQ, MI5, 6, etc., weren't affected by it. And a lot of people had come out and said who was affected by it. So the people on the other side were quite happy to sing about who they'd infected by it. So the US were obviously quite heavily hit. And I thought, well, why is that? And actually, it's because our approach to it is really, really sensible. And we spoke about this briefly before we started this, about trusting third-party code. No one likes to hear, yeah, you've been done, basically. And that's quite a lot of the time of what it was. So I remember giving a kind of debrief once where guys like walked in and he was like, right, didn't get anything then, did he? I was like, didn't get anything. I was like, we got everything. And it was fully undetected. So when we pulled out, he was shocked. He was like, oh my God. He's like, I asked my team for a report of everything that's happened. They said nothing's happened at all. And I've had that a few times where people have contacted us and said, you were supposed to be pen testing this week. When's the pen test going to start? And we were like, we're writing a report, doing this done. And they're like, oh my God. So they don't realise that a lot of it's fully undetected. So when like I heard about the SolarWinds stuff and the NSA and the rest of it, they straight away, obviously the US was hit quite a lot. And I thought, like, I got asked on a radio interview the other day, am I surprised about what happened? And I thought, am I surprised that a capable nation state has used their capabilities to exploit their way into another nation state who they see as hostile, who's one of their adversaries? And of course, I'm not surprised. That happens every day. We're doing the same. But what I was surprised about is how trusting a lot of these organizations seem to be of these companies like SolarWinds and FireEye and the rest of it. Because to me, like, if I'm introducing any third-party code into my system, I want to know exactly what that code's doing, whether it's an update or whether it's a tool or whatever. And I'm definitely not saying don't use tools. I'll talk about this a lot. And it's like, as a human, we're definitely limited by human performance. So you have to use tools. That's fair to say. But I'm not going to be introducing stuff into my critical network without that being fully audited. And that's what I was surprised about, really. And that's why I was quite proud of the fact that by the look of it, GCHQ, MI5, MI6, the NCSC, etc., didn't seem to be too infected. Because I thought you're doing what you should be doing. And that's properly modeling, properly looking at all of the stuff that you introduce into your system and whatever. So that to me was interesting. But the reality is, if you've got Russia, China, Iran, whoever on your system or attacking you, you've got issues, definitely. And that's what I find interesting about it.
I agree. And the thing you said there is, and again, we know from experience, is like the British, you know, they painstakingly look at every line of code, every function of a chip. You know, if they have to take it apart and introspect every tiny element, it's just, there's great attention to detail. And I think, again, it has to be. And what's interesting, I think, about sort of the work you do is the other side to it. So we've you know, as you talked about the sort of nation state element, you also have the organized crime side of it too, right? And this is why I used to give a lot of talks called OPSEC for hackers. It wasn't a talk designed to teach cyber criminals how to get away with it. It was more about teaching cybersecurity professionals how to implement enough operational security elements into your workflow that you're not harassed by these types of people, right? And, you know, whether it's nation states, but as I said, the other side is organized crime. I remember when I first got back into it, like way back, I was approached by this person who was messaging me. I can't remember even what platform it was. And we were talking. He was like, yeah, I'm from South America. I was like, okay. And he was like, I want you to do this job for us. Okay, what's the job? I need you to build an ultra secure like messaging app. And I was like, okay. And it's like, it's going to be called, was it Escobar? And I was, I mean, at that point, obviously alarm bells were ringing. I'm like, okay, yeah, South American guy wants a highly secure encrypted mobile app called Escobar. He's probably not selling cupcakes. So I decide I'm checking out this guy and his network, obviously using some OSINT skills that one naturally has in this area. And when I look up his network of people, I'm finding pictures where they're sitting on, stacks of cocaine, gold-plated AKs, the works, right? Of course, the first thing I did was nuked every account I had, and just said, screw this. It wasn't even going to enter into the realms of saying no. That's an extreme example, but I've had people, and this is why I don't really talk to friends and people I know about what I do these days, because when I was first getting into it, it was like, yeah, I've been working on this, we hack that. People naturally talk. It's probably not your friends that are going to get you in trouble, but your friends talk, right? Hey, I know this person who can hack stuff. Their friends talk. Maybe 2-3 hops away, there's an organized crime network or some people that want to take advantage. And an example of the sorts of things, I've been approached and asked, secure messaging is definitely top of the list, right? Criminals want a secure way to, send to talk. But another one is, they're looking for tools to steal cars, like relay attacks. They're looking for tools to, defraud people with credit cards, carding. They're looking for tools to implement sort of ransomware campaigns with a very low level of skill. And of course, for the record, I'm stating I've never ever helped anyone do any of those things. But what's always struck me as slightly odd is how I don't feel I even give off that impression that I am a criminal. And I certainly am not a criminal or affiliated with any criminal network. So it all strikes me as slightly odd that they're brazen enough to approach you and think that you might be. So I think it's really interesting that, as a security researcher, which, you make a good point. We don't make a habit of working with sort of nation state stuff. It's much nicer to look after corporations, right? You get nice flights, you get good meals, nice hotels. Generally speaking, the stakes aren't as high by any means. But you still get, even in the corporate world, it's unlikely you'll have a hacking career without someone asking you to do something, gain information on someone or track someone or get hold of some, next year's accounts for some insider trading. And it's like, that's as someone who's openly sort of white hat and on the right side of the law, you often have things like this that they're asked, but I think that's a supply and demand thing, right? It's like there isn't much of a supply. There aren't that many people that sort of have someone they can call on that can do these things. So I think it's a bit of a desperation thing. When someone comes across someone who has the skill set relevant to their objectives, they're quite brazen in asking you to do that. And most of the times it's played off really well. But in one particular case where I sort of turned someone down, they approached me face to face, and this was a sort of well-known organized crime group. And they're all carrying guns. They're all sort of pretty nasty guys if you're on the wrong side of them. And that was really tough. They'd show up at my house and be like, you're gonna help us. And then I remember one guy sort of showed me a handful of bullets and was like, this is, we can take care of our friends. We'll look after you. I was thinking, well, thanks very much for the offer, but there's not many people I need to cap. I'm pretty good. Like I don't need your help. But that's an example of sort of how these things come into play as an individual. So it's really important, not just for organizations think about that, but your own personal risk profile, right? I forget the guy's name who did a lot of the safe hacking. No, not safe hack, ATM hacking. Do you remember?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Barnaby Jack.
Yeah, that's it, right? I mean, he was hacking pacemakers and stuff. There's a lot of conspiracy around what happened, right? But I mean,
I knew Barnaby from DEF CON, and that was that was a hard hit in the hacking community, definitely. And do you know what? Talking about him quickly, and sorry to interrupt you, but I remember where he gave a talk And I was at that talk, and everyone ran up, like loads of people there were just there for Barnaby Jack, and they ran up to him with business cards, giving him business cards, saying like, "Come work for us, come." And I thought that's quite a lot of heat.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think that's the point of where I'm going with this as well. Is like you have to be careful to a degree, right? As we said with Benjamin Delphin, Mimikatz, or with Barnaby Jack. Like you can get into an area of research which is so novel, so new, but so dangerous that you become the target. I think was it Ian from Project Zero definitely 100% did the right thing. I mean, they disclose stuff the way they do with Project Zero anyway. But even if he had a change of mind and thought, you know what, this exploit's really powerful. I'm talking about the sort of, remote takeover, zero-click interaction stuff through the radio features of the iPhone. That's mega powerful, right? He could have said, you know what, I'm going to sell this, worth a lot of money. I think as he put in his blog post, imagine having the ability to fly a drone over a group of protesters and route their phones with zero-click interaction from a distance. That is Aladdin's sort of was it his little Aladdin's device, his sort of genie bottle or whatever, right? Your genie bottle. So I mean, to a lot of people that's pure magic. If you're in the industry and you understand how it works, makes sense, right? The exploit totally makes sense. It's amazing that I'm not taking away from that, but it's certainly not magic. But someone who can't do these sorts of things, Barnaby Jack, Ian, as I said, Benjamin Delphi, when you're in the area of research, you might just be doing something others consider magic and will do anything they can to get hold of that ability. So I would just say, like, to anyone who's listening to that that's in the community, it's a good idea to just consider the risk, right? Is a lot of people just dismiss it and say, that's not a problem. These things don't happen. Just people, happening it. But that's 100% not true. We're speaking from experience, right? And luckily we've never been in such a precarious situation as Barnaby Jack or Benjamin, right? But you can easily end up there. So
yeah, and I think you have to be seriously careful. So there's a story about when so obviously, I know certain. So what people forget is that people in law enforcement, people in government agencies, etc., people like you and I, they're not people that have grown up thinking, I want to work for a government agency. Generally, they're deeply technical people. Some of the best people I know are all ex-agency, law enforcement, etc. People I work with every day, and they're some of my best friends and people that I know really well. And I remember, so like, I know that community well. I know a lot of people from that community, etc. And when I was working in the Middle East, so I was working in Iraq, and I remember someone saying, like, if anyone meets you, don't do anything for them, whether they're like American or English or whatever, or an asset. And I remember hearing a story of a guy that he had a camera and he was in Iraq, and someone met him from the plane and said, look, all we want, basically, you're going into a hostile zone, we're really struggling to get assets in there, all we want is your pictures. So that's it. We'll pay you well for your pictures. So he's thought, right, okay, got family at home, whatever. I'm going to go and get these pictures anyway. And he was actually meeting three of the top people from Al Qaeda. So he's working for a big network, meeting these people from Al Qaeda, and they just wanted the pictures of them so they could put them through facial recognition or whatever they wanted to do, whatever. So he's gone there, met them, come back, given them the pictures. That's it. Probably been paid a few grand or whatever, or paid well for it, whatever. Gone back to America, come back to Iraq or Afghanistan, wherever he's gone next time. Same person's met him. So they're resourceful, and they know where his movements are when he's arriving, etc. And they've met him and said, we want you to take pictures. We want you to take pictures with this camera. So he was like, nah, I don't know how to use the camera. Don't know like how it works. I'll get found out. So we're like, okay, but when you go there and you meet these people, they're probably not going to be very happy if they see these pictures that you took last time and they knew you were working with us. So then straight away, he's like, I do. Like, what do I do now? Do I do what they want and keep working with them? Or do I potentially get outed for doing what I've done before? And all he thought he was doing was giving pictures away. So people say, like, oh, that's out of order. And I think, like, and this is going to be controversial, but I think, is it out of order? What people don't understand is that these agencies are in the game of intelligence. Yeah, that's what they want. They want to build an intelligence picture however they have to build it. And there's some serious work that's been done in stuff like piracy and all this kind of stuff. Like if you saw the story of the MV Soldana, which was with Captain Phillips, pirates have boarded the ship. And literally within like 8 minutes, really, really quickly, what they've done is use satellite imagery to effectively like scout out all of the ships that were local. I don't know what surveillance they got on it, audio surveillance, video surveillance, whatever, but they knew that these guys in a skiff had gone from a boat that was, or it was a boat that had been taken hostage 200 miles away or whatever. So they got on the radio to these Somalian people, and they were like, look, we've spoken to your boss. Your boss is this guy. We know where he is. We've spoken to him. He's told us what you want. We're going to do it. But he's told us to tell you this. In reality, they hadn't at all. They just found out that this guy was close. So the point is, they're not going to say, oh, no, actually, let's not do that because of this or because of that, whatever. They want that intelligence picture. And I think when it gets to a point where you can provide something and you start not providing that, then you're really treading dangerous ground, because that's where like you're hindering an intelligence picture, which could help their assets, could save other people's lives, whatever. So I've always purposely like stayed away from that. But I know people that haven't, and I know people that work for those. I know people that recruit people for those agencies. I know people that have recruited people that are called CHIS, so covert human intelligence sources. And if you're like in a really like big organized criminal group, so for example, the Hunt Syndicate was a really big one everyone can read about. So the Hunt Syndicate were deeply embedded in the Met Police and in soccer. And they were actually so embedded in them that they got the contract to replace all the locks on prison cells. So there's a massive, massive family of criminals. And what was actually their downfall was that they were planning to execute a police officer as he came out of a police station. So these police officers basically got a call and said, there's a hitman outside, don't leave the building. And that's when it starts becoming pretty serious. So if you're a human intelligence source or a covert human intelligence source in that, imagine what like risk you're putting yourself at if you're like feeding information to the police. And also, let's not forget, and one of the points I was going to make is, when people think of like an organized criminal group, it's like if you say to people, right, so for example, in TV, yeah, say somebody in TV, right, guy's moving in from Mexico to a little village in Yorkshire doing whatever. How's he going to look? How's he going to dress? Whatever. And straight away, people like draw someone with a sombrero and think like, oh yeah, that's what he's going to be like. Or people say, okay, like hackers come into a building. How's he going to look? Well, he's going to have a black hoodie with his hood up, and he's going to be like doing this and that, whatever. That is just a stereotypical view. In reality, a lot of organised criminals are well funded. They're going to turn up in a Bentley. They're going to turn up wearing a suit. They're going to be well dressed. They're going to be members of all the clubs. They're going to have networks of criminals within police forces, within all these different places. They're going to be well resourced, well funded, etc. So it's not like your local tattooed football hooligan who's going to be trying to recruit you, going, "Here you go, mate. Yeah, want to do a bit of work for us, do you? We're going to be really know their stuff." And mate, the reality of it is that like you get ex-police officers who are serious organised criminals. You get people that would have gone one way or the other, where they would have either joined the police and been a great police officer, or they've joined a criminal organisation. For example, people that are ex-SAS, ex-Special Forces. You kind of go two ways if you come out of the SF community, which is either organised criminals or private security, close protection. That's like the two ways that you go. There's not much of a middle ground. And one is clearly probably a lot more profitable than the other. So quite often these are well-educated, well-sophisticated, well-versed people. And it's not always the way that you think. But the point I'm really getting to in a long-winded way is that these people are fierce networkers. And like you say, these people will sometimes spend ages planning how to get you in the best way. So, for example, they look at your pattern. They know you're into martial arts, for example, so BJJ. They'll join your BJJ group. They'll get to know you over a few weeks. And then as you get to know them more, you become a bit more open. What do you do? What do I do? Etc. And really, you're being recruited. And I know people. I work with people in those organisations. I know people that used to work on the Eastern Bloc, running intelligence sources over borders, etc. And they're always, it never dies with them. They're always looking to recruit people. And I think you can't blame them for that, really. That's the business they're in. So most of them, especially from our perspective, like you politely decline and that's it. But yeah, if you're working in the Middle East or you've got this or that or whatever, you're potentially open to having some serious pressure put on you. Definitely. And look, like Francis Bacon said, knowledge is power. That's what they want. And yeah, it's a really important thing to remember, I think. So yeah. I've definitely.
I agree. One thing that sticks out in my mind, I think it was sort of last year, the year before, I was in Dubai and presenting some stuff to the Crown Prince. And I remember when I arrived, everyone says, they check your passport and it's really strict at the border. And I remember everyone's getting stopped and they just wave me through. And I thought, oh, I got lucky. In retrospect, it's obviously because the profile was so good. I didn't even actually need to be stopped, given the fact of sort of the kind of access I was going to have to the Crown Prince. I myself didn't get approached or hassled, primarily because I was 100% on my best behavior. None of our shenanigans that we talked about before, not trying to look for cards, not enumerating networks. I don't even think I actually even got my laptop out, just to keep it cool. But someone I was with wasn't so sort of diligent and was a bit cavalier. And I don't want to name names, but a certain nation state exerted a lot of pressure on them to give up information of the technologies and things like that. And this person ended up saying, well, they didn't say no. They started bargaining about how much money they wanted, but they were asking for too much money. That they just said no, it's not going to happen. And so this people representing this nation ended up just stealing the technology. Like it was, caught on camera, and they just stole it. But arguably, that was a better result. I think he got a good way out of that. Luckily, his greed actually saved him in that scenario, because I think what would have been worse, without a doubt, is accepting any kind of offer from this particular country. And so that's definitely something to consider, even as you travel around. And what you're talking about as well, about the different kinds of people, I used to talk about that in my OPSEC talks, which was, you talk about sort of interrogation, right, or soliciting information. And most people think of, let's take the CIA, right? Most people think that they're going to turn up and bundle you in the back of a van and sort of stick your phone in a Faraday bag and never seen again. Yeah, I mean, that happens for sure, right? But that's not going to be the first port of call. If they're targeting someone like myself or Mike, they might think that something more effective is to send a honey pot into the bar, right? A beautiful looking woman, right? Wearing a pretty revealing outfit, who decides to join you at the bar and ply you with alcohol night and play on your ego and say, oh, that's really interesting. I didn't know that was possible. Oh, you work with these guys? That's really interesting. Maybe even take you back to the room and while you're asleep or while your attention's diverted, gain access to your device, physical access, this kind of thing. So, I mean, it's a balanced work. You don't want to walk around thinking everyone's a threat. So with that said, because it's like, how do you deal with that? I think the most important thing, because I call that sort of stuff leverage, right? It's about, the guy taking the photos, that was leverage. The best thing to do, I think, if you're going to be on the white side of cybersecurity, you have to be super white, right? You have to be super legit, super legal. You have to be able to say to people no, and then to have no leverage on you, right? Which is part of being super legit and above board. And it's about being disciplined and maintaining your core values, right? I have a saying when I sort of meet people: listen to all, follow none. Right? I'm willing to be a friend, but not a follower. And there's a very important difference in the two, right? I'm not going to throw anyone under the bus. I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to, make a thing out of it. But don't even bother asking, because it's going to be a polite no, right? And keep it. And so I think that's the only way to do it, and to not talk about stuff. If you're in a bar and someone's asking questions, it's like, keep your mouth shut. I mean, what blows my mind is the amount of people, and I know this happened with you, the amount of people that we've had drinks with, people that have worked in these types of roles. The minute they have a few drinks, the stories flow. Names, times, dates. There's stuff that you just can't repeat. But it flows with the alcohol. And I talk to some people about this quite a lot, who are social engineers, and it's the whole thing on ego, right? Like, if you're with someone, particularly works well with guys, but if you're with a guy and there's probably some information you want to get from them, you might play on the ego in the sense of, you tell a story which is pretty mundane on the same lines of where you want to elicit the information. Oh, hey, this one time I did this, super lame story. Most of the time, human natural reaction of that ego kicking in, or, you start to build that rapport, you're interfacing with them, they're going to turn around and say, you know what? One time I did this. And So eliciting that information can end up being simpler than you think. So I think the best line of defense is just to not say it at all. Don't send it. Don't do it. Don't partake in it. Don't entertain it. Be very disciplined, in what you do and how you approach it and who you work with. And as much as you can, do your research,
Yes.
make sure you're not accepting money from terrorists.
Oh,
That's
100%.
an important thing.
Yeah, and also, so bear in mind that people start shows. So probably one of the best experiences I had actually was when I was in a country in the Middle East. I checked into a hotel and done like the typical thing. So like swept it, seeing if there was anything obvious, whatever. And obviously treated it like a hostile environment. And I'd probably been there 10, 15 minutes, sat down, got my laptop out, knock on the door. So I knock on the door, two guys pull a badge out. And they're like, do you mind if we have a drink quickly? We obviously want to welcome you to the country, just come and have a drink. So when I had a drink with them, no problem at all. And we were talking, they were like, you've done some really interesting research on this and done some really interesting research on that. And it's not out of our capability, but we'd like to talk to you about it. And they said, but firstly, the question we're going to ask is, if you found something through us and you worked with us and we pay you well for it, and it was useful to your country, what would you do? And I said, I'd tell them. I said, I'd tell them first and foremost. I live in the UK, I'm loyal to the UK. I would 100% tell them, especially if it was to national security. And they went, absolutely no problem at all. That's where this conversation ends. Do you want to go for a drink? Do you want to see some of this country? And we drove off. And like I say, they're similar guys to us. So technical guys in the business of recruitment, went off. We went for a really, really good meal, had a good chat. They dropped me off. So see you later. And that was it. Really, really good experience. And that was totally fair enough. Like, they were there to do a job. They wanted to know how I would act if, through working with them, I found something that would be useful to the UK. I told them honestly. They appreciated that and respected that, and that was it. We had a great time, and I'll never see them again. But it was really, really interesting. But to those that are watching that don't know, when you joined INSINIA, Matt, we were a much smaller company than we are now. So we were doing quite decent work, quite decent business. Obviously, working with these big companies, doing a lot of interesting stuff, taking over crime, etc. The value of INSINIA was only probably less than $1 million, so probably around the £1 million mark. And both of us really navigated this organisation through to multi-million pound investment and got some really, really good investment and really made the company what it is today. Matt's now moved on to pastures new and is doing some fascinating stuff as well, which is really good. I'm still at the helm of that business. And between us, we did some awesome work together. And I know we both really look back on that fondly and both enjoyed a lot of success in it, really. And one of the things that I was going to talk about, which I'm surprised we haven't got to already, was hacking Twitter. So we already had a really good media profile. So I'd done a few documentaries. Matt had appeared on a few radio shows, and INSINIA quite often was in the press for some pretty good research, to be honest. So whether it's like hacking the 4G network or the telecoms network or TalkTalk or whatever stuff we were doing, we were always kind of quite a high profile. And then we ended up hacking Twitter. So then the kind of reason why I thought it's relevant is because, like you said, look, you've got to stay white. So what we found was that, what was kind of alerted to us, mainly through you, Matt, was that there was this vulnerability that we could use to exploit Twitter. And we had a chat about it, and we said, look, okay, it's definitely a grey area here, doing how are we going to do it and what are we going to do? And we took loads of flack from this, and I ended up giving a talk at DEF CON about this, which is really, really interesting. But I'll talk a bit about how it's unfolded, man, and you can definitely tell your side of it, because it's really good. But basically, we had a tool that could spoof text messages, and I wrote this tool I remember originally I wrote it in Java, and then you rewrote it in Python. And I think I still use your version now. And basically, this tool would allow us to spoof text messages. So Matt and I we're talking to the security research team that was kind of spread across 2 countries at the time, and we're saying, look, there's an opportunity to hack Twitter here. How can we do it? So we started having a look at it, and I'd worked with a number of people in the press, so people like Eamon Holmes. We had the information for a number of celebrities, and we found that by spoofing text messages, we could hack Twitter. And when I say hack Twitter, we looked at this, like I say, from a white hat perspective, and we thought, okay, what can we do? Well, what we can do is we can retweet stuff, we can send tweets, we can't access DMs, we can't access personal information. There's nothing like that we can do. All we can do is spoof text messages and passively control that account. So we kind of took a view on it and said, right, okay, we could do it. And if you remember, we went through phone books, and I actually worked out that we could control up to 2,000 Twitter accounts at the time. And obviously nobody knew about this. Nobody knew about its vulnerability at all. So we decided how we were going to do it. And how we were going to do it was we were going to send out a tweet from INSINIA, and we were going to say that basically this is how we have hacked these accounts. this account is under temporary attack. No one's lost access to it. And here is the full details about how we've done it. We then retweeted that tweet from these celebrities' accounts. So from Louis Theroux, Eamon Holmes, Sarah Khan, I think was one of them, and a couple of others. And then we tweeted from them saying, this account has been temporarily hacked by INSINIA security. Read how it was done here.
Security firms as well, which they got some retweets.
Yeah. Well, like I say, at the time we were quite selective, but I know that after going through our phone book and using our tool, there was like thousands of people that we could have controlled. But we kind of looked at the bare minimum of what we'd need to do to get it front and center, and did it. And we did it. We took it. Yeah, we did it. We hacked Twitter, and straight away we're getting press contacting us. I'll post some links in here about what happened, and people said, yeah, but you've hacked Twitter, and then you put your name on it. Why didn't you just hack Twitter? And for our perspective, that could have been an awesome demo. So imagine that if we're sitting in these talks, we're charging a lot of money for, and we say, right, okay, let's pick a Twitter account of Eamon Holmes, who's like a national treasure when it comes to TV presenting. Like, look at what we can do with his account. We can retweet stuff where we could have kept that exploit for, it would still be active now if we didn't do that. But we said, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to put ourselves front and center because it was really important for us, for everyone to know that, that they weren't under legitimate attack, and that it was security research, and they hadn't lost access to it. We'd not accessed any of their stuff. Because straight away, if I was Louis Theroux or Eamon Holmes, I'd be thinking, well, they've accessed my personal details, they've accessed my DMs. So we wanted to make it very clear that we hadn't done that at all. So straight away, the backlash from the community was massive. So we had loads of people tweeting us saying, you're all ex-law enforcement, so you've not been done through it. Blah, blah. I was like, hold on, it's only been 2 hours. Do you know, like, what's going to happen? So really, we were front and center, and we made it very clear. It was INSINIA that had done it. We made it very clear the ethics behind it, about why we'd done it, how we'd done it, etc. That was a vulnerability that had been in place since 2011, maybe even before, and subsequently was closed because of that research. And the backlash was massive. And we kind of looked at that and thought, okay, well, what's the ethical way of doing it? And in my opinion, I still stand by it now. I did a lot of press, because I've spoken to DEF CON about it. And I still think that we did that proportionally, morally, ethically, and everything that we did was sound from that perspective. And so I do think you have to be careful with how stuff's released, how it's done. I was completely happy to stand in court and justify what we'd done and how we'd done it. And the reality of it is that it ended up with Twitter being more secure for all of us. So it's really interesting. It's definitely worth having a read up for those people that are watching. And that to me was it was probably one of the most interesting things we've done, not because it was super cool or it was amazingly technical, because it wasn't at all, but just because of seeing how the community reacted and what people were saying. So people were unethical. So well, how is it unethical? How is anything that we've
really
done?
Polarized.
Oh, massive. Yeah, massive.
But who was supporting our view, Hacker Fantastic, he was like, say sort of agreeing with the point. And I think sort of talking about that, for me, it's sort of talking for my motivation was like, we had reported it. Other people have reported stuff. Even on some like Twitter bug track from way back, someone, I forget who it was, reported that. And Twitter were like, hey, look, can't fix. Some countries use Twitter to in India, right? They don't have the sort of internet connection, so they tweet with SMS. Well, I mean, fine, right? But just restrict that to India then, right? Rather than having this global service. I mean, there's ways to do that. So just didn't think that was acceptable. As Mike said, we couldn't read DMs. But one thing we could do was send a direct message to someone else. And so this was my motivation of like having to like get some attention and get it fixed, because from a sort of hypothetical point of view, let's say that wasn't Eamon Holmes. Let's say that was Boris Johnson, right? The Prime Minister. Or let's say it was the head of the Ministry of Defence, British Armed Forces. Well, then you start to abuse that chain of trust. If I can control their account and send someone else a direct message from them, right, with a malicious attachment or a malicious link, well, that's a great vector. That's 100% more effective than a phishing email, right? Because this is, if Boris Johnson sends one of his cabinet ministers a DM with a link, they're going to click it, right? Pretty much, I'd argue 100% of the time it's getting clicked. Because you're abusing that chain of trust. No one's going to pause for a second and think, was that Boris? If you get all the things right, if you get your pretext right, if you get your link looking good, it's getting clicked. So it was that element that really worried me from a national security perspective, was how many other nation states could exploit this to socially engineer people covertly, right? A direct message, it doesn't even get seen, right? Yeah. And so how do you know that this isn't being exploited and so on? So that was a real big thing. And the second part was the technical side. So people said you hacked Twitter. I mean, everyone has their own sort of understanding of what a hack is. For me, a hack is sort of exploiting a system's logic or diverting sort of the execution flow or the logic of that system. And I think technically we didn't, right? Because the argument is the service that we used to send the text message to spoof, that was okay. They allowed you to specify the sender's number, right? They have an API that allows you to send a text message. We're not even abusing their terms of service. That's okay. Now, Twitter has a feature that allows you to text to tweet that accepts the from number to associate it to an account. So
yeah, that's authentication.
In my mind, we used a feature, right, of two systems. And in fact, even if you said that ethically you shouldn't spoof a number to service one, technically it was service one that manipulated Twitter. Actually, like, it was that service that forwarded that text message to Twitter that carried out an action. So I actually think the failing is on Twitter and this service. Why? Because the first service should check that you own that number, right? Good services that do this type of thing, they make you verify the number before you add a sender number. You know, that's the proper way to do it. Clearly, a lot of these services make money off spoofing stuff and legitimate users. So don't talk to me about ethics when it's these companies that are blatantly flouting the law, right, and acting unethically just to make money. So, don't bite down on me. Take a look at these companies. And then in turn, Twitter, they don't verify that it's actually the number. It wasn't actually the number that sent it to them. It was a virtualized service, right? They could have seen the request headers, seen it came from this company. There were no checks. So look, you can call it a hack, you can call it whatever you want. I say it was terrible engineering, bad features, and we made use of features that were there, provided by legitimate services, didn't break any terms of service. We paid to send the text was sent, Twitter interpreted it. It's like, I agree with you. I was willing to stand in court and say, prove it was a hack, prove anything illegal went on, because it didn't, right? We had the number. We didn't hack Eamon Holmes and steal his number. We had it.
So what I did after this was, obviously we got legal advice after, and was quite actually really interesting was the interpretation of the law. So firstly, if something's malicious, it has to have some sort of criminal intent. Did it have criminal intent? No. There was no financial gain for us. There was no criminal gain from us. We kept ourselves front and center for that reason. So there was no criminal intent. Secondly, did we secure access to anything? No, we didn't secure access to anything. So we didn't take control. There was no ATO, we just can't take over and take control of anything, secure any access, lock anyone out, smash the place apart, be malicious or destructive. There was none of that. No malicious intent whatsoever. Thirdly, guidelines of prosecution say that there has to be a reasonable chance of conviction for a criminal prosecution to be brought forward. Were we going to get prosecuted for it? Probably not. The other thing is there has to be in public interest. And was it in public interest to take us to court and spend taxpayer money trying to prosecute us for showing and highlighting a vulnerability which didn't give us access to anything, earned us no money, had no criminal or malicious intent, and didn't take anyone out of their account?
But had massive implications on public safety, national security, and a whole array of things.
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen for the first time in this actually. So what we can see here is that this was some of the press it got. So here, Sky News, they did quite a big piece, which was actually reasonably good. The BBC. So the point I was going to make here was that there was a guy that was particularly upset about this. And he was constantly about how upset he was about it. And he had like a tin pot little Twitter account that I'd never seen it. I didn't even know who he was. I'd never seen him before ever. Until he started sending me a load of abuse via my email. So sending me a load of abuse, sending me a load of profanity, saying, yeah, you effing this, blah, 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 well done, yeah, and all this, calling me loads of names and whatever. So I was like, okay, maybe he knows me. But so he's like, yeah, sending me all this stuff. And he was really upset because we never said that we were first. We never said that we developed this exploit. I mean, we'd seen it elsewhere. We understood that we could leverage it. We did. We took the opportunity. We did. Simple as that. They didn't. Yeah. So we never said that we were first. And that's what really upset this guy, because he thinks that he did it before us, like a few hours before, and that we must have seen it and ripped his research. If we had have ripped his research, we would have noted him. We would have said, look, we first saw this on this or whatever. We never said that that was our big thing and, oh, look at what we've discovered. We just said that we found it was possible and that was it. So here, this is talking about what happened, and it's saying that I've denied breaking the law, which is quite interesting. Because I'm not sure I actually did deny breaking the law. What I actually said was that the law wasn't fit for purpose and the Computer Misuse Act wasn't good. And here we can see, I can zoom in this now, but yeah, we can see that like this is what was tweeted. So this account has been temporarily hacked by INSINIA security. That's from Eamon Holmes. That was obviously it on Louis Freeh. But then what happened as well is these people came out of the woodwork, yeah? And they kind of said like, oh yeah, look, like, so they quoted us saying we denied it breaking the law. Nothing has been maliciously hacked, which it hadn't. And it then goes down to like people saying that, yeah, that it was totally unethical and it was bang out of order and whatever. And obviously I'll post links to these as well. And this was someone who wasn't very happy about us doing it. But the point is people weren't happy at all. What I was going to show though is this. Find it here. Here you go. This is now 8 months after we'd done this. And this is exactly what we were warning against. So this is the real nefarious side of it. Yeah. So we were saying, look, people could use this to spread extremism. They could do this, they could do that, etc. This is what happens when it was really used maliciously. So you can see here that it says that he was victim to an attack. So it's basically saying that he was the victim of an attack, which has been reported repeatedly, but he denied it was a problem. This is what we were trying to stop. So this was through an SMS service, etc. But when you look at what he wrote, it was some quite extreme stuff. And this is what we said. And you wrote largely that blog, Matt, which said about it and said, look, this could be used to spread extremist content, be used to spread this kind of stuff, etc. Then, of course, Twitter was hacked more recently, where Elon Musk and Barack Obama and everyone else say that they're going to multiply people's Bitcoin. So you send like $5 in Bitcoin, we'll send you 5 times back. It's like, it's the typical age-old thing, isn't it? If it looks too good to be true, it probably is. And we've been warned about this for ages. So that was why we did it. And that was just one of the things really that we did together, which I found interesting. So it's like, so for me, and this is why I think we've got such a good relationship really, is that like kind of went from being like the new kids on the block, like smashing everything apart, to then like getting substantial investment and developing loads of stuff together. And I always remember like we were on a call and we were like, yeah, it'd be really good if we had this tool. And then Matt was like, oh yeah, by the way, I've built it. So it's like 10 minutes later, like Matt had built this tool that we needed. And it was just really good. And I still look back on that now. So that even now, like obviously INSINIA is a quite a large group, multi-million-pound group. And I know you've gone on to do potentially even bigger things. And I still look back on that time of us traveling around and just doing what we wanted really. And like I say, being the new kids on the block, being the kids that caught the emperor naked. And I'll always do that with fond memories really. And stuff like this, doing this, it's been a really fascinating time.
I agree, absolutely, and you know it's good. Like I said at the beginning, is like getting the band back together, and you know I'm excited to see where we can take this and explore more options. And you know, one thing sort of you know before we wrap it up is sort of what we're doing at the moment. You know, you've got this really interesting YouTube initiative going where you've reviewed the Ring doorbell, which is great, and the Virgin water purity system. And again, I think that shows your approach to technology. It's always been that no frills, like straight up. The truth is the truth, right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it both ways. If it's good, it's good. If it's bad, it's bad. You know, the facts are the facts, and so I think that's really good to see these types of things. And yeah, I hope that I can join you on some of those and we can rip some stuff apart together. And yeah, also this, what we've been talking about in these stories, we're going to put out as a podcast as well, which is a more sort of edited version of this. And as we've spoken about together between myself and Mike, you know, we're just, as always, is you know, what's meant to happen usually does, and we want to roll with this and see how we can take it. And I think in today's session, we've just sort of scratched the surface. I know that there are tons of things we haven't talked about, things we haven't mentioned, even sort of events that are happening. And I really think it'd be good for us to get together again and cover those topics. And bring on some of the guests that we've been talking about during this session, and have them with us and get that sort of other angle.
Yeah, 100%. And I think for those who haven't seen it, so the video you're talking about is the one where I talk about the Ring doorbell. And with that, I use a jammer to jam that Ring doorbell. And what's actually been really interesting is that really revolves around tech-enabled crime. And if you look at the comments, people are saying, so I'm talking about people using that to stop themselves being detected when they're stealing cars or stealing from cars or invading your home or whatever. So basically, they're using that to commit a crime, to facilitate committing a crime. And then a lot of the comments are saying, yeah, but these jammers are illegal. It's like...
Yeah, so stealing a car.
Yeah, so it's like the people that have come to steal your car are going to think, whoa, Jeff, don't use that jammer, man. We're here to steal a Range Rover, but don't use the jammer. That can get us loads of trouble. And it's like, come on, get real. Like, this is what people do. This is the way to do it. And the reason why I did that video is because in my local community group, people are saying, oh, my car was stolen last night. My Ring doorbell didn't get it. And people are saying, oh, yeah, like, your battery must have run out. Well, no, I think someone knows if their batteries run out, or like PIR detector didn't get it. It's like, no, who uses PIR? Like, it's definitely not PIR. So it's tech-enabled crime, and people don't understand it. So yeah, hopefully, like you say, we'll get together, do a proper piece on tech-enabled crime. Like you say, it's going to be a podcast version of this, which I'll also put a link to in the description. And it's been really good, really catching up. Like even things that we mentioned, I'd forgotten about certain things, and it's just good to refresh your memory, really, with stuff that we're doing before the days of running the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And in our next session, like I say, we'll cover some tech-enabled crime, but also some updates on what's happening in and around that. I look forward to it.
Yeah, me too. And likewise, if anyone watching's got any questions or comments, wants to send us anything over or suggestions, then yeah, we're always happy to hear about it. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. And Twitter accounts in the description or the links. And we promise if you follow us, we'll not tweet from your account.
Yeah.
Yes, our pinky promise. All right, well, it's been good, and as I say, Mike, an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to our next session.
Yeah, likewise. Cool, man.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for today, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, nice one. Look forward to it.
Take it easy. See you soon. Bye.
So that brings us to the end of this video, which was almost 2 hours. If you've got any questions, comments, or anything, feel free to get in touch. And if you enjoyed this video, then please like and subscribe, and we'll keep you up to date with everything that's going on. And like I say, if you could want to get in touch for any reason, then we'd love to hear from you. Thanks. Till next time.